But my name is Parker Johnson, he, him pronouns, and we are part of the Cottonwood Creative team based out of Calgary, Alberta, Canada. A little to your north, but not that side of Canada. Linda's kids are always like, Parker lives so close, he's in Canada, but I'm not anywhere near Detroit. Um, but anyway, we are super excited to be here and to move through not only some really important concepts, but also some real ones that you're actually encountering there in Michigan in the church. So the goal was to make this presentation as useful and realistic so that you could apply it immediately. So that's kind of the tone in which we're going to move forward. Yeah, go ahead. Got to wow them with the first stuff. So anyway, today we are going to be talking about turning events into invitations. And obviously, we have multiple audiences here that we're going to be talking about. Anytime you have an event, that means there needs to be an outreach component. In Community of Christ, oh, first, we already introduced ourselves. Sorry, I skipped over this part. I was so excited about the curtains that I kind of just went right into the next slide. I pretty much everything here. I'm a communication strategist. I have 15 years of experience doing marketing in a variety of sectors. And I love doing what I do, working with communities to tell their stories and to connect beyond, not only internally, but beyond into the larger community. And I'll let Joanna introduce herself.
Well, as you already know, my name is Joanna, and I specialize in communicating messages, and I'm a visual storyteller. So I combine the invitation to turn it into a visual. That's mainly my focus and my work with Cottonwood.
Perfect. All right. So, like I was about to say earlier, lots of good work happening in Michigan. You guys have amazing events and programs that you have out in the world. Sometimes the hardest part is not planning the event, but actually communicating the event. I know some folks who have done reunion planning or youth camps or any sort of congregational event that you're doing with the community. It can be really difficult to get the word out and to know what might resonate with people. So that's why we're here today. We want to make sure that we help to amplify the good work you're already doing. You're already doing the work. It's just tacking on that communication component. So as we have here, the challenge, you're good at doing what you do. It's just sometimes it's difficult to know who to communicate to, how to get in touch with them, and to know exactly what to tell them when you can get in touch with them. So, as I mentioned at the beginning, instead of just speaking in theory, the idea here is that we're actually going to talk about two cases that Linda passed along to us that are actually happening in Michigan. They'll just serve as examples for how to move through what we're teaching today, but it's at least relevant in your context and not just some theoretical, oh, here, it would be a great idea to do A, B, or C. This will actually be relevant to the Michigan context. All right. So today, at the end of this, first of all, you'll get an email from Linda, maybe tomorrow. I'm not sure when, but after this session, with the recording from today's gathering. You can always use that to go back to any of the topics that we cover. I always like to say this because if you're like me, super ADHD, I'm just constantly trying to write everything down on a notepad. I'm probably going to lose anyway. But you can just listen to us. You don't have to feel like you're going to miss something because it's going to be recorded. So if that helps put your mind at ease, I just wanted to share that bit. And then you'll also receive a freebie from Cottonwood, which is going to be an event marketing guide and checklist. And you'll see us actually use this in real time as we move through the presentation. But this will be a document and a resource that you can go back to for any of your events that you're planning, whether it's a mission center level event or a congregational event. It'll just be kind of a really great guide to go through every time to make sure you're not missing any steps with the topics that we're going to be covering today. Am I missing anything?
No.
Okay.
All right. Well, today's session, we are gonna talk about practical and examples that are currently happening with current events. We need to make sure to understand 5 key terms. While they still sound a little bit more complex, they will be pretty useful because we will be using it through the presentation And you will find these terms as well on the guide that we are going to provide for you. So it's important for us to get familiar to what does these terms means, or what do we want to achieve when we talk about them. So the first term, and very importantly, is the audience or the target audience. When we talk about target audience, we are talking about the specific group that you wish to reach through your event. And one of the common mistakes that can happen is thinking that everyone is our audience. But if we think more in deep, if we are promoting an event for women, we may not target kids. The kids are not part of the invitation. So these talks to boiling down to which group or people do we want to invite. Following term is segmentation or targeting. So if we already know which group do we want to invite, segmentation is pretty much breaking down that group that we want to communicate and getting to know their interest, getting to know what are their fears, or simply breaking down in more specific these groups. So you may be wondering in these two terms, what is the difference between the audience and the segmentation? And here's a clear example. So as I was mentioning, a women's event, your audience will be women. But if we go a little bit more in deep about what type or which women do we want to invite, then we have young moms or retirees. So this is pretty much a representation of what does it mean when we talk about audience versus segmentation. And also, I wanted to say that all these terms are gonna be mentioning a lot through the presentation. So don't worry about memorizing all of this. We'll keep a reminder through the presentation as well. The next term that is very, very important and very used is the call to action, which pretty much talks about the next step you want your audience or the people you invited to your event to do. It's important that this call to action is clear and that you only choose one. It can happen often for an audience that doesn't really know. They may like your event, they want to attend, but there's no clear next steps. So being clear about if it is a registration or would you like them to sign up, stick with one. And that way it's going to be a clear message for your team and for everyone. Oh, here. This term you may heard it around in social media, which is engagement, or you can also call them interactions. And through each event, you want people to engage with you, depending on what is your goal. But pretty much engagement talks about how do you want them to interact with you. And lastly, over here, Parker.
Forgot to mention, I'm a lifelong Community of Christ member. And so I speak both languages just like you do about internal and external. I know the complications that can sometimes arise when trying to bridge that gap, depending on the type of event. And so one thing that is important that we're going to be talking about and reinforcing repeatedly throughout this presentation is internal versus external. And sometimes it's both. We know that we want to be as invitational as we possibly can. We all, in the ideal world, we want to be able to say, we want everyone to come to reunion, or we want everyone to come to family camp. But those two audiences, even if you invite them to the same thing, might need it shared to them differently. For example, I know Community of Christ through and through. Because of that, I know what Graceland means. I know what International Headquarters means. I know who Stacy Cram is. I know what Doctrine and Covenants means. I know a lot of the lingo that we use. Someone externally does not know that, and I don't need to explain every single thing under the sun to that person. But for example, I wouldn't want to invite someone externally to reunion because that feels like a family thing. Like to someone who's not Community of Christ, reunion feels the name reunion, sorry, not the actual event, but the word reunion feels like a thing that an insider needs to go to. If I've never heard of it, why would I go to somebody else's reunion? That doesn't feel like an invitational term to me. So family camp would be a much more invitational term to somebody who's not Community of Christ because that feels a lot more like, oh, okay, all families are invited to this. So I just wanted to make sure that like we have this quick conversation about the fact that we can certainly invite people that are internal, external, and both, but sometimes the invitations are going to need to be drafted differently. And we'll take a bit of a deeper dive into that as we move through the presentation. Oh, sorry. Can you go back?
There we go.
The one thing I forgot to say is on the if it is a both situation, a yes and we're inviting both internal and external, I would highly recommend that you start with the external messaging and then adapt that message to the internal because a lot of times we make a lot of assumptions when we talk to ourselves about something. We think everybody probably already knows where Buckhorn, sorry, I was just talking to Southern California. Uh,
Sanford?
Yeah, Sanford. There we go. A Michigan campground. Somebody might not know where that is in Michigan, and so you need to be a little more clear about that. So anyway, I would recommend you start with the external audience first and then adapt for internal. And again, we'll talk a bit more about that as we move through the presentation. Okay, so now we're going to walk through this together in our first exercise, and we're going to apply what we just learned. Okay, we got our little whiteboard out here, and we are going to talk through the steps. So you'll get, like we said, there's a resource that's coming after this call. What we want to do as we begin to plan an event is to, before we even invite anybody, think about all of these items here. So what kind of or type of event, who is it for, where is it taking place, what's the purpose of the event, and how will we achieve that purpose? Those are the first things that we need to put together and be really crystal clear about. So, for example, we have this upcoming event happening at Blue Water, youth retreat for grades 6 through 12 at Blue Water Campground. We have the type of event here. We have who it's for, in this case, grades 6 to 12. And then we have the location. The purpose would be to explore faith together. Obviously, we can distill that down a little more depending on the theme. And then how do we want to do that? Through games, music, sports, worship, campfire, all the amazing things that we do at camps. So then, because we know what the event's for, we can now start to think about who we want to invite to this event. You can have as many groups, but let's just start with 2 or 3 about who you'd want to reach when you start putting together some thought on communications. So obviously, we're trying to communicate to youth. Sometimes that doesn't mean that you can actually get a hold of a young person. It means you're talking to their decision makers, so parents, grandparents, those folks. So that's the next group. And then youth leaders, congregation volunteers, camp alumni, all the like. So it's a very diverse audience from an age perspective, different interests, different reasons for their why they would want to engage and why they'd be interested in learning more about this. Obviously, a youth is interested in going to the event. Somebody who is a camp alumni might just be interested in donating to that event, for example. But regardless, those are the groups that we might be interested in reaching out to for this. As a reminder, kids can't make decisions about going to camps by themselves, or can they pay for things by themselves. So we want to make sure that we're talking to the decision makers, but also keeping in mind that those decision makers might be showing their kids the graphics that you put together or the poster, and it should excite them as well. So you're talking to multiple groups at the same time. And then I kind of touched on this just now, but what motivates each group about this event? So if you're actually a member of the youth age bracket, am I going over yours? I am.
Fine.
You go ahead. I just stepped on Joanna's toes.
It's all right. I think that Parker was nailing it with the explanation. And in this part here on the segmentation, what we want to know, it's more in deep on those three groups. As Parker said, there could be way more groups that you may be communicating, but putting your efforts and pointing just two or three will make that communication more effective to these primary groups that are going to be the one attending or participating on the event. So over here on youth in grades 6 to 12, pretty much is the excitement to attend the camp and make new friends. And all this is important to kind of know, because we are going to take this and draft our invitation for the event that addresses these interests or concerns. We also have the parents, where they will consider like what will motivate them is a trusted care, a faith-building experience, and financial help available. That is also through the event. And lastly, we have leaders, volunteers, or alumni that may go back to the program and are excited to contribute and go back to the community. Now we're jumping, and in the fourth step, we go back to communication. How do you draft a message for your own community? And how would you do it for an outside, for people that are outside the community? And here Parker can speak well about the communication.
Sometimes it's both, right? And I think when it comes to the external communication, it is one of those things that I think is just going to be a muscle that you have to start exercising and getting used to reaching out and developing the content for that group. Internally, I think we've got it down pretty well. We know how to talk to ourselves. And that's a great skill to have, but it's going to be one of those things that if you start externally, even though that might be more difficult, it'll help to reshape the way we communicate internally as well. And I think that's really key, because sometimes we assume that someone whose grandchild, who, like, let's say the grandparent has been a longtime church member, their grandchild may not be attending a congregation, may not have any relationship with Community of Christ. And so by the time the message gets to them, if it's only written internally, that kid has no idea where this campground is, what happens at church, what happens at camp, what happens at a campfire. Do I get my own room? Like, I don't know anything about what I'm signing up for. And so we just really want to get away from making assumptions. And so I really wanted to spend a moment about the fact that that's why I think it's so key that we start with the external audience first, because you assume they know nothing. You know nothing about Blue Water, you know nothing about Sanford, you know nothing about youth camp. Let's start from there. And then it's really an exciting opportunity to start to describe this thing that we're all so passionate about in Community of Christ. I think that's,
And after we define and we are clear about who do we want to communicate to, inside Community of Christ or outside, we're going to define and choose one next step that we want people to take. And in this case, is register your teen. As we know, kids cannot make the decision to get registered. Then we're talking directly to parents or decision makers. And in this case, we boil it down to register your teen. And next, we're going to see an example of how these 5 steps translate into an event invitation. So over here, I'll be like walking you through the invitation for the external audience. As you can see on the left on the graphic, it's composed by bright colors, playful fonts, kind of like the graphic also addresses, and if it gets shown to kids, it's something that may excite them and say that they want to attend. And on the reading part of it, we have a short and clear title that pretty much talks about when is the retreat and who is it for, kind of pictures what is going to happen, and followed by a description that answers what will happen, who is it for, why come, and when and where. So being clear in these 4 things, it's quite important for an external audience to be clear and understand what is this event about, and it's addressed directly to them that have no idea how are the retreats or how is that the experience at a camp. And lastly, you'll see the call to action that is register your team today at the website. So this is like an overview of why those 5 terms that we just spoke translate and why are they important for us to get familiar with it. And as Parker says, start practicing and getting that into a real example or your next upcoming event. So that way your message can connect with a broader audience.
Before you move forward, I think another important thing you'll notice here, and again, you'll have these slides so you can take a deeper dive into the example here. You're not seeing church language written in here. You're seeing, let's say, safe language for people who may not understand church world, but who are interested in coming to this event and who would be willing to participate. They just don't necessarily have to see a lot of the terminology that we're comfortable with because they'll be exposed to that likely at the event. We don't want to bury the lead. We don't want to not be transparent, and we want to make sure it's clear that this is a church-sponsored event. So that's important, but we don't have to. We need to communicate the same thing we're communicating internally, but in a way that can be well received to a public audience. And so this is the exact same event. I'm putting on my Community of Christ hat. This is the exact same event for the internal audience. And so immediately, I'm kind of looking at the fact that, again, if we're going to decision makers, we're still talking to them. The sacred grounds where you grew in faith are calling the next generation. So that would not have translated to the external audience, but in this case, that makes a lot of sense because as a parent, I want my child to have a good experience like I did at Blue Water or at Sanford. And so you can start to kind of speak about the legacy pieces there. We talk about generational experiences. We talk about the types of things that people who have attended a camp or a retreat have already experienced. And so you're pulling on some heartstrings, you're thinking and conjuring up memories and hopefully good memories. So it's the same invitation, but it's written differently, knowing that your audience is going to receive it differently. And we talk about legacy as well. I think that's also another important piece here. Okay, that was a lot, and I know we're moving quickly, and it's mostly because we want to have some time for questions and comments at the end. But again, I want to reiterate, you're going to be getting a resource at the end, and we're about to put that exact resource into practice in the next section. And so what we just did, we did all the work for you, the 5 steps. We went through and said, okay, you're talking to youth, camp leaders, decision makers. We filled in all the blanks for you. This time, we're going to actually ask for some engagement. Linda, I might need your help if anybody types in the chat because I can't see it at the moment. But feel free to does everyone have the ability to unmute, Linda? Okay, so if you have a response, feel free just to unmute and say it out loud. We're going to be taking requests from you, or answers from you rather, and filling in the blanks as we move through this and actually do this exercise together. So the next event that Linda told us about was the Riverview Congregation Craft Show. Very different than a Mission Center event. It's not happening at a campground. It's not like a statewide call for invitation to come to this thing, or even a regional one. It's a more localized invitation. But we wanted to use, again, two actual real examples in Michigan, but 2 different ones to help explain that same process can work for both. So again, what type of event is this? Who is it for? Where is the event taking place? What's the purpose of the event? And how will you achieve that purpose? So I'm going to skip the first one because this one is pretty self-explanatory. It's like an actual craft show. It's an artisan market. It's clear that in the name craft show, this is something that we're wanting to bring people to in the community and maybe the surrounding communities. But I'm going to put it back on the audience here to kind of tell us who you think might be who it's for. Who do you think this event is targeting?
Well, I'm going to speak because it's our congregation.
Beautiful.
It's not just for the crafters that come, though it is, but it's to bring people in from the community into our building.
Mhm.
Absolutely. So we're boiling this down, but that's exactly right. Um, a neutral reason to come into the church and experience that space and the people in it affiliated with it. And so you nailed it right there. I didn't see who was speaking, but thank you so much for that. All right, where is the event taking place? Again, I'm going to give you a bit of a freebie because this one might have been hard, but it's at the Riverview congregation. And then, okay, let's talk through purpose. What do you think the purpose of this event is? And there can be multiple.
I think one of the purposes would be um, for people to be comfortable inside the church facility. When you're inviting people who are unfamiliar with your congregation, this may, and they may be curious as to that congregation. They may be more comfortable if they've had an opportunity that is a non-church event, as far as a non-religious event, to be able to come into the building and kind of check it out and get a little bit of a feel for it, and maybe get a feel for some of the members who are helping to coordinate things.
Nailed it.
You would think that possibly that it would be raising money for the congregation, but I would think that it also might be a percentage of that or all of it towards a community help center or something. So then when you propose it to the public, you could say that also in your purpose to them.
Definitely. Those are details that can certainly help to bring a value proposition as to why someone might want to buy into that, why they might want to attend. And so I don't know the particulars around the fund usage. So I'm just kind of referring to them as the raising funds, but not necessarily the reason or where it goes. We're just kind of taking a stab in the dark here on that part. But you nailed it as well, is that we're thinking about what might draw people in. Maybe I don't even really want a relationship with the church, but I don't have issues with the church. I just don't really want to attend church, but I love the things the church does. So maybe if the church is raising money for a cause that I'm really passionate about, great, that might bring me in. So you got to think about kind of the things that orbit the primary purpose. Perfect. And then how will you achieve that purpose? We're renting booth spaces to local vendors. We're providing that welcoming venue in the form of the building. Hopefully, people are being greeted by lovely, kind people like yourself. And so there's plenty of that kind of support for why we might want to be able to articulate this in a trying to think of the right way to say this, because like there's the purpose of the event, but then there's all the kind of intangibles that also exist when you're talking about people's experience, and it might change someone's perspective about church who may have had a bad experience. It might bring about a really interesting connection that someone never even knew, that a person who's been a longtime member of that congregation, that someone in the community knows, never knew that they were religious. It could be a lot of really cool things too. But again, we're talking about more of the specific ones here. Okay, when it comes to target audience, I'm going to ask the group again to participate here. We gave you a bit of a cheat sheet on the right side here, but naming 2 to 3 specific groups that you may want to reach when you're dealing with invitation for the Riverview Congregation Craft Show.
Well, definitely community members.
Absolutely. I don't remember which order these go in, so I'm just going to wait.
Not going to be a craft show without your crafters. So you need to really focus on getting those people to say, yes, I think this will be a good place for me to invest my time and effort.
Absolutely. There we go. I forgot how we did the animation on that one. So the only other one that we put on there as well was small business owners, because kind of same as the local crafters and creatives. Other groups that may have been on this list could have been sponsors, for example, if you're looking for sponsors. It could be like a food truck if you're trying to like get some food there or something like that. But these were the three that kind of came to mind for us when it came to how we might get the best bang for our buck when it comes to who we reach out to. Okay, so given those three groups, what are the reasons for each group that they might be excited to attend? We're going to start with local crafters.
Well, I think it's nice for crafters to be able to have an opportunity to interact with other crafters, and share ideas, maybe learn a few things, a few tricks from each other. Obviously, they're going to want to make some money, and so you need to bear in mind that if you're doing a booth rental, that it's something that is within a reasonable range.
Totally. Making it accessible is really important. Any others?
I would say for group number 3, community members, that there seems to, for the last, I can't even guess how many years now, people love to buy locally and to support small businesses, people who make crafts, things like that. They love feeling like they're making a difference in individuals' lives instead of corporations and stuff like that. So they would be, I think they're excited anytime an activity like this is happening in a community.
Totally agree. I find the same for myself.
Yeah. I was going to say, who doesn't love like a local market where you can connect with people and nearby business or crafters? So that point is very, very important.
Can I add on to that too, since I know about this craft show?
Yeah.
That was a very good point that they just made. And something that we found beyond the fact that the crafters get to know each other and they make money, we have 2 a year. We have one right before Easter and then one right before Christmas. And so we have, when we promote it, we promote that you can buy your Christmas gifts now, or you can get ready for Easter, that kind of thing. And people really appreciate it. And the crafters adjust what they're doing for those items too. So I think that's a benefit to the community, a place for them to shop for these handmade items that are special for the time of year.
Absolutely. How long have you all been doing the craft show?
Forever.
That's awesome,
Forever.
though. People start
But
to rely on that, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah, and we really do.
Yeah. Okay,
I have a question.
Go for it. Oops.
I'm wondering, and I may have missed something here, but I'm wondering, is you're referring to the information that's going out to the general public, or are we targeting specific people that we want to attend? And I'm thinking that how you might address that to solicit crafters would be different than if it's an invitation to the general public. And I'm wondering how that would fit into what we're talking here.
Absolutely. You're 3 slides ahead of me, so that's perfect. We'll get there in just a second because that's exactly where we're going. So just to quickly kind of round this out, I'm sorry, I'm pointing at my other screen here, but for local crafters, there's a low risk sales opportunity. There's built-in foot traffic, there's community connections, and also, as was mentioned, being able to connect with other crafters. For small business owners, there's the ability to reach local customers, maybe make a new few connections there. Minimal setup because they don't have to travel very far, testing out new products, and they can expand their customer base. And for the community, they get unique handmade finds. They get to support local talent, and it's a fun weekend, fun day to go spend with your family and connecting with people. Okay. This is probably going to be a both situation in reality because you're going to need volunteers, you're going to need people from the congregation to be there. However, we're going to focus on the external here. Okay, so we have the two groups that we just kind of called out here on the external side. So what do you think that the call to action should be when communicating to these different segments of our audience? Oh yeah, we gave you your cheat sheet as well.
Oh, I was going to say start crafting.
That's a good one.
Mhm.
I mean, you can get really creative here. I might like yours better than I like mine. So reserve your booth is like what we kind of came up with was here's the call to action. Make sure that you get your booth secured and paid for, or however you handle that on your end, so that we can start planning for how large the event's going to be. But like I said, there's no one right answer here, right? Like we can do a variety of things. For the community members, what do you think, what would be the appropriate call to action? These are the shoppers as far as we're thinking.
I would think they need to mark their calendar,
Mm.
you
And
know,
Go
as
ahead.
I'm sorry, community members. Well, they could donate to support, depending on exactly what is going on.
Absolutely. So this is also, you bring up a good point because there's no real wrong answer here. It could just depend on where we're at in the promotional cycle. Like, let's say it's way out and we're just saying save the date. Maybe mark your calendar
Right.
is the right answer.
Well,
If
it can also become shop local, especially if you're doing it like in November when their small businesses are promoting people to shop locally. Um, that's always a really important thing to focus upon.
Mhm.
I ask a question? Sometimes when especially if I'm scheduling out posts for a specific event, maybe for a couple of weeks ahead, like as far as how people are planning, when do we go from mark your calendar to like, hey, remember, this is just right around the corner? Like, what kind of timeline do people need to be marking their calendar versus saying like, oh, that's right, I have this next week, like as far as people's habits?
That's a great question. Do you want to take that one from
You
the
can take that
resource?
one.
Okay. So we have different timelines for different things. A big event like a mission center conference or a camp, we usually think in a term of like 6 months. That doesn't mean that you have to have registration ready 6 months out, but that means that we need to start kind of dripping out the information to say, okay, this is when this is out. And if it's before that, great. But that gives you the runway to be able to say 6 months out, save the date, here's our theme, here's our guest ministry, like whatever the things are going to be about it, even if you don't have the registration, and you can kind of start trickling it out. We usually say for the bigger events, 3 months out for registration is when you can kind of switch from save the date to register. And then as you get closer, it just kind of starts. It depends on if you do like early bird pricing or if there's like subsidies. There's always going to be something you can kind of help to say if you don't register by this date, the price increases, or we're running out of room. There's always that ability to have like scarcity, which helps people to kind of get motivated to take action. The smaller ones, it just completely depends on how small we're talking here. Like if it's a potluck, I would think like a couple weeks in advance is, kind of enough. Um, Although different people prefer different things. I know for me, I'm kind of all over the place. So if someone's like, hey, do you want to hang out tonight? I might actually appreciate that it's just today and I don't have to think about planning something. So I would say like for a smaller event, like I don't see this craft show as being a small event. I would say it's more like actually I don't see who all's speaking. So whoever was speaking earlier from Riverview, how early do you start like the save the date cycle for yours?
Hi, I'm Kathy from Riverview, Kathy Williamson.
Hi, Kathy.
Um, we start actually when we had our last show just before Thanksgiving, we already had flyers for the spring show, because we have crafters who will sign up then to attend the next show, and we also have shoppers who want to know when the next show is.
Yeah.
So we do start then, and we take registration then, and then we begin, like we just had a planning meeting last week. So now we'll really ramp up our messaging and trying to contact people, not the crafters so much because she's almost full already, but getting the word out to other people because our show is in like 6 weeks, I think. So we start sending the Facebook messages out and whatnot, that far in advance. It is kind of a big show. It really is.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And that's another good example of knowing your audience too. You're knowing that you have such a good core group that the end of one event is the best time to go ahead and get them aware of the next one. So Linda, it's kind of not really one answer for this. And I think we have more of a timeline that we can provide you as well, for some of our recommendations. Because sometimes it gets a little redundant too. Like you feel like you're sending out the same thing over and over again. But again, especially for the bigger events, it is good to have like that 6-month runway.
And also, I wanted to add that on the practical guide that we'll be providing, there's not you don't have to follow it exactly as Parker is saying, like it depends on certain things, but there's a checklist of a few things to keep in mind if you're doing your event like 6 months prior. A few of the items that are important to like communicate or important to have. So that will be provided on the guide, and it's not a rigid timeline or checklist, but it's something for you to guide yourself and have it as a reference.
It's at least good to think about because, like, again, it's not like all events aren't created equally. But it is good to know, like, if you're someone like Linda and people are handing you all these events that are going to be coming up, if you kind of have a general treatment for those for events by size, it just ensures that things get treated fairly and equitably as we're trying to communicate about them and promote them. So it's just a good rule of thumb to have the structure.
A question or comment.
Mhm.
It's interesting we're talking about craft show. I had talked with someone who is a crafter and put together craft shows, and she indicated that you need to know because they often book out that far and they need to do the preparation. I guess that would hold true for other events as well, you know, and looking at what it is you're doing, what kind of lead time is necessary for the various participants. You know, leave it at that.
Yeah, sorry, you cut out at the beginning there. I'm not sure if there was a question. Was there a question there? I don't want to miss that.
Not so much a question, but a comment that in talking to a crafter and who put together craft shows was saying you need at least 6 months notification with crafters so they have time, so they will get it on their calendar and have time to do whatever preparation for that. And I assume that would be true with most other events, that based again on the participants, what kind of lead time you need to give them.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, if I'm a vendor and I pickle things, I'm going to need a little bit of time to get all my pickled veggies in order before the event.
Maybe I'm a little bit ahead of what you're going to talk about. My wife just brought up that possibly a poster on the door leading out when you're leading out of here's our name of the church and what we're about, so that visitors could say, hey, you know, maybe this is something I'd like to look into.
Yeah, absolutely. So we don't really go into too much depth here on the, like, I call it like complementary marketing here. So let's say you have the craft show. It's obviously being held at a congregation. You have your volunteers there from the membership there. It's always a great opportunity for people just to get exposure to the church because you're hosting it there. I would kind of have to leave it up to you locally to know how that would be received. If having, you know, like religious tracts or posters or pamphlets or a QR code, or, you know, even just having a friendly conversation about learning more. That's kind of a bit more regional. I think in Canada, it's a bit more secular here as well. And so there's a lot of distrust towards churches. And just getting them in the door is the win, like at the event. Not that they join the church or do anything, and I'm not suggesting that you're trying to make them do that. But it is just a bit of a nuance there to know kind of what people would feel comfortable with. And so having stuff there is always a great idea. And I really like passive things like posters that aren't like someone trying to hand you something and they're just kind of uncomfortable. So I definitely think a poster is a really I don't know, like low pressure way of providing information, especially if there's a QR code or, even if you could do pamphlets, but if I would just make sure you're not like handing them out, like again, like they could just be on the table and people could take them if they wanted to learn more. If you have like, I don't know, I know some of the craft shows I've been to, they'll have like a map of the different booths and what's kind of there. On the back side of that, you could always have kind of a bit about the host, the building, and how long you've been doing it and why you do it. Like there could be some of that information there as well. And then of course online, whenever you're promoting this event, you could certainly have like a little bit of information at the bottom, and maybe there's a link to a page on your website or a PDF that explains kind of why you find this to be really important work. Again, like you said, you've been doing it forever. Like that's a really important thing for me to hear, that this isn't just the first year you've done it. Like it's cool that you've been involved in the community this long and that this has been something that you're now a staple in that community in that part of Michigan, doing this type of work. Testimonials never hurt either, like from the crafters themselves to say like, I've been coming here for X number of years and this has been one of the best experiences, or whatever. So hopefully that answers your question. I know that's a bit of a roundabout way, but I do think it's an important thing to consider.
John Bellinger from Tawas City. Kind of like your show, your program you're putting on right now. When I first heard about it, like your craft shows, when I first heard about it, I became interested. Right, it was served to me of something that we could use to help our congregation grow, and I say, okay, that's okay. And then a little later, I got more correspondence either from you or from Mission. It's kind of a reminder that this is coming up, and so you kind of put it in the back of your mind. Okay, I'll kind of keep track of it. And then just the other day, I forgot I hadn't done it. Reminder to register. Oh my gosh, I didn't never have registered yet. So I went ahead and just said, okay, I clicked register. And then I got a notice today that time is coming up, my 15-minute window before the start of the show. I was back in the deer woods. So my wife had to come on. I called her, so that's why my screen was black. I called her to get me in on the screen and get me set up to be up here for you. So I did appreciate it, and I am enjoying this. And the final notice is time to start, which is what I had to get here. And that took me 15 minutes to get here from where I was at. But overall, all in all, I am enjoying what you're sharing. And I also see that it can apply for greater than what we're looking at here, because like our congregation is all senior citizens. So when you guys talk about youth, well, there may be some grandchildren down in the bottom. There may be some programs that we as senior citizens could do for senior citizens, and a craft fair or a flea market. So just by listening and participating here, I'm learning quite a bit. So I want to thank both of you for sharing.
Thank you. And thanks for racing back for us. I feel the same way. Like, I mean, I live and die by my calendar. I have my calendar for everything. And then sometimes, even with the best intentions, I get a 15-minute warning on my phone and I'm like, how did I miss that? I don't know. Like, but now, okay, I need to jump on this call or I need to go to this event. And that's a good reminder for us that I think sometimes I've heard a lot of people say, well, we've already sent enough emails. I don't want to bother people anymore. And the reality is, until I hear someone say, Parker, you are blowing up my inbox and I need you to slow down with the emails, that's really not my concern. My concern is ensuring that the people who are interested in the thing get it and they get reminders about it, and that it's not considered rude. It's just that we live in a really busy world right now, and having the reminders is usually something people appreciate. Obviously, we can abuse that and we should not abuse that. But just throwing that out there, that it's useful for people of all ages to have reminders. We just have a lot going on in our lives. So we move on to the visual example here. So this is an invitation for the shoppers themselves. So this is a Facebook event kind of mock-up here, so you can see what that would look like on a Facebook event. And again, we're taking liberties here based on what we were told and shown about past craft events. So for those who are actually involved in this event, if we actually missed the mark on a few things, please forgive us. We're just using this as an example of how we can, incorporate our learnings into an actual event invitation. So we put together this event visual. Actually, Joanna put this event visual together. And, we're trying really hard to keep it simple, not make it really overwhelming with a ton of text, but we want it to be really clear that this is, just by glancing at it, I see a shopping bag. I know that there's something about going out and buying things. Then I read a little bit more. Discover one-of-a-kind handmade treasures, artisan goods, and local favorites all under one roof. The address is there, the date's there. We're missing the time, but that's also on the other side. So you can add that or take that out of the graphic, depending on space. But again, the call to action, the title here is short and clear. We have the description answers for that nail all the things that we've discussed, what's going to happen, who it's for, why they should come, and when and where it'll happen. And then, of course, we have that call to action that we talked about. In this case, we said mark your calendar. But like we said earlier, it could be something different. It could be that they, well, in this case, bring a friend. It could be that they come by ahead of time to, get familiarized with the space. It could be donate to ensure this continues happening. But in this case, we chose mark your calendar. And then the next one's for the vendors.
Yes.
Okay, so same event, but invitation for vendors. And in this case, obviously the text is shifted up here. We say calling all crafters and makers, and there's a sewing machine versus a shopping bag. And it's the call to action, or sorry, the visual there is affordable booth space with built-in foot traffic, bring your products and meet your community. So same event, but we have a different title, sell your products at the Riverview Craft Fair. And then we talk about affordability. We talk about the quality of their goods. We talk about meeting people in person and forming new relationships, foot traffic, and then we hit all the things that we did in the other, where when, where, why, for who. And then for our vendor focus, the call to action is to reserve the booth now because spaces are limited. So same event, two different invitations for two different segments of audience. Am I missing anything on that one?
We're good.
Okay.
Now, a few examples that we just saw, and I just wanted to bring back again the importance of choosing like the messaging and the call to action that makes sense to your event and to your context. And now I'm going to talk about a few platforms and resources that are free for your team to research and be able to create on a simple and easy way. All the posts that you have seen before, I just took a Canva template and I just changed the text. So these are tools that can be very, very handy and they're free. So you will find on the guide a list of free platforms and what to use it for and when to use it. That can be also confusing. And nowadays, like there's so many technologies out there. There's so many platforms that can do a bunch of things. So we boiled it down for you. So you have a list of free resources that you can select depending on what is your need. If you want to promote something outside or inside, you'll find that on the practical guide.
I will also just mention for some of these, there's nonprofit discounts or they're all out free for nonprofits, depending on the platform. Always worth looking into. Maybe I'm just like a coupon cutter, but I'm always asking about discounts. So just wanted to throw that out there because some of these things can get very expensive if you need to pay for the pro version. A lot of the free versions may be limited, but you can still do some really great things with them. But if you ever need to upgrade and have the paid version, a lot of times there's discounts and even they might be free. Okay, so we have reached the end. We actually did pretty well on time. I appreciate you hanging in there as we went and like raced through the first portion so we could get to the examples. I think we could probably turn the slides off just so we can see everybody if we wanted to. We have like here's our last few slides. This will all be sent over to you at the end. But I think if Linda, if there's any questions from the group, we'd be happy to take those. And as a reminder, we're always here if there's any questions.
I have a question if you don't mind. I'm wondering when it is useful to make a Facebook event versus when it's maybe not worth our energy. They're not hard to make, but everybody is spread thin. So, are those helpful still? And I imagine it depends on the audience. Like, for example, we decide we're not going to make a Facebook event for every single youth camp because we can communicate with the parents and grandparents who are bringing kids in a way that's more effective and less work. But for, say like a Mission Center event, or if I'm Riverview and I'm having a craft show, like how do I decide when it's effective to make a Facebook event?
You might not like my answer, but the answer is that you just decide. So the thing is, like, I think it's important to just have some sort of guide for yourself to say events, for example, can be based on size. Events with X number of participants or more, or anticipated participants or more, that warrants a Facebook event. Or let's say it's a youth rally, and you'd rather just focus on connecting with the youth directly. Facebook isn't going to be really that helpful because they're not on Facebook. So, it kind of depends on, like you said, audience, and then how much time and effort you want to spend on that. Because the other side of that coin is that you may create Facebook events that people don't engage with, and then publicly it looks like no one's attending it. Even if people are planning on going, but no one's RSVP'd to it, it may make someone who stumbles upon it think, oh, this isn't going to go well because no one's signed up, right? But they may have already signed up on email or registration forms or something else. We just aren't communicating that, and we can't up the number manually on Facebook events. So I know that's not the most satisfying answer, but
No, that's helpful. That's helpful. Thank you. And it looks like Kathy has a hand up for a question as well.
I do. I really appreciate all the things, and especially because it relates to we have an upcoming event, so that's really helpful. And I may steal some of that wording that you guys used. But my concern is how do we get the word out, not just how do we prepare a graphic? Does that make sense?
yeah.
Like
So
we posted on Facebook, but that's about most of the extent that we're able to do.
So I have a question in response to your question. Do you have a mailing list for email contacts?
For the congregation we do, and then the person who runs the craft show has a list for the crafters. And she does give them the flyers. But that doesn't get to, other than Facebook, it doesn't get to the community for people to come.
Yeah. And
For promoting, I guess that's what I want to know. How do we promote our event to the community?
totally fair question. So I'm not familiar with Riverview. Is that smaller town or kind of suburban, urban?
It's definitely smaller, but we're within a bigger community. So, we're south of Detroit, but far enough away from Detroit that that's not feasible for a lot of people. But we
Okay.
have a lot of other cities right around us.
Got it. I think what would be useful, and I asked that because I'm from a really small town in Oklahoma. The way that we would communicate and promote things is very different than I would now living in a city. And so if the newspaper is still a really viable way of getting information out, by all means, take advantage. If people frequent a coffee shop or a specific cafe in town, a poster there if they're willing to have you put it there. So like you can do low tech ways, especially if you don't have access to a larger email list. There's no sense in sitting there and thinking, okay, well, I can only communicate to these people, when if you print out a few posters, you can certainly reach out to a lot of people who might just come in the door of a really, popular restaurant in town or something like that. So I would say low tech might be the better option if you don't have the bigger following on social. The other thing I would recommend is on social, if you have a Facebook or an Instagram, is seeing if you can get some community partners involved who maybe are sponsors or who are willing to be tagged in that. Because when you start tagging people, for example, my company, Cottonwood Creative, if I tag Michigan Mission Center's Facebook, my post is now reaching not just Cottonwood's followers, but all of Michigan's followers as well. And so if your craft show event tags multiple groups in there, then their people are going to see it and it gets out beyond the limited scope of your own audience. And so that also could help if you're strategic about that.
And I
Thank you.
just wanted to add that one thing that, at least for a younger audience, we really like for a local, for example, the craft show, a Facebook event. That's at least the way that I find about local things happening. And if someone's looking to do something that they can easily locate it without even following you, just because it's an event that is nearby. So that could be also a tool that you can implement in these type of like community events. So people that have no idea, they can just find you by proximity.
That's a good point. The Facebook events based on the location would pop up for people based on where they are instead of just the fact that they follow you. So I appreciate that. I think Winnie has their hand up.
Yeah, I have a question. My husband and I participated in I'm not even sure what you call it, but a wedding extravaganza where there's lots of, venues, booths and whatnot. And as part of the event, they had a door prize. And so at every booth, you had to put your name and email address in a bucket or something in order to be eligible for the door prize. And then each vendor had their own bucket of contacts after it was over to use for contacting in the future. How do you guys feel about that? Is that kosher? Is that irritating to people? Or what do you think? Is that at the craft show, could they have a giveaway and collect emails in order to do the giveaway? And then once a year, they could contact those people and say, it's time for the craft show again? Or do people frown upon that nowadays with collecting their data?
Can I answer that for our craft show at least? Sure. We do a couple of things like that. We do drawings for the crafters themselves, and they all get a gift certificate or like a gift card, just a $10 gift card. All of the crafters end up winning one of those. But we also this last year started doing drawings for people who come in the door, but we haven't collected their information. We do a basket giveaway. We include an LGBTQ table, and so we do a basket giveaway there where people can put in their names and so we have contact there. That some of the crafters do what you're saying, where they give something away at their tables, but not all of them. But in our one thing we did start doing was we have a friend of mine who happens to be a crafter at the show has started helping us with advertising out. And as we send promotions out, they highlight one of the crafters. We just started doing that so that it's a different crafter like each week so people know what's coming. And I think that really helps too.
This event is going really well. You guys are doing great. I will just respond quickly to Winnie's comment or question. I think that, first of all, I appreciate the fact that you're thinking about data collection. A lot of people just like don't think about it, and they don't necessarily have the permission to do what they think they can with that email address. As long as the laws are different everywhere, but usually as long as the slip of paper they're filling out says, by submitting this, you are, authorizing us to communicate with you via email. That's legal. That's fine. I kind of assume if I'm signing up for something anymore that it's going to require that I'm giving them something. But as long as it's clear, I think it's totally kosher. Especially because people are usually willing to give that in order to be like involved in potentially winning a prize. So I do have one more thing I wanted to say to Catherine. Some communities, like I know in Calgary, they'll have like here's what's happening in Calgary this week. And so like if you're looking, or this weekend, here's what's happening. And there's like free things to do in the city this weekend, or like great things for families to do this weekend. And so if there's anything like that in your part of the state, those are always great, usually free opportunities, because they're just trying to drum up local things, right? And so if you find that there's a local magazine or some sort of website that, aggregates all those events and wants to help cross promote, I would certainly reach out to them. But just be aware that there are sometimes when you post on like Instagram, especially, you'll get a comment immediately that'll be like, DM me these details. And then they'll want to get paid to help cross promote your thing. So I wouldn't pay anybody to do anything, but I just wanted to let you know that certainly that's another free way of reaching more people.
Someone on the comment on the messages say to reach out to the Chamber of Commerce.
Yeah, Chamber.
Chamber of Commerce, so you can like strategically with partners promote your event.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Andrea Hopkins from Grand Valley, Michigan.
Mhm.
I've been posting events for a while on Facebook, and we've had good turnout and bad turnout from doing that. But the other way that I've been doing is that each area around here, like I live in Wyoming, so in Wyoming we have several different Facebook groups for the area I'm in, and I have been lucky enough at event times to be able to post my event on that page so that you're targeting your community. So not just sending it out as a an event, but also your community. And then the same thing what you guys mentioned about is that when they click on the event and they see the host, it goes back to the Facebook page specifically for our church, and it has links to what our beliefs and things like that are, so that they can check us out before they even come.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a good point too. There's a lot of the local Facebook groups that you can post to.
Mhm.
Usually you need to like get accepted into the group. So it might ask you like a few questions like, do you live in this area? Like, why do you want to join the group? But it's free to join. Um, I had one more thing to say about that before I go to Peter. It was something about, oh, as far as like explaining the church's beliefs, I am all for that. I think it's really important. And I think that, for example, the craft show, it has nothing to do with church to go to that event. So I think it just needs to be clear that like the event has nothing to do with worship or any of that stuff. But if you want to learn about the hosting, congregation venue, here's how you do that. And just make sure it's clear that this particular event is not a church event. It happens to be hosted at a church. You can find out more information at your leisure, but this event itself is not a religious event. Just want to make that clarification. Peter.
Just a reminder with Facebook events that you can either make them public or private.
Mhm.
And if you're not careful, you can create an event that really isn't shareable to the general public. And then that also goes with your own personal your settings on your privacy settings. I've created things that I want people to share and they can't share it because I have my settings to just my friends only. So you have to be really careful to pay attention to how you're setting up your audience when you're doing things on Facebook, or it won't get out as far as you hope it will.
Very good reminder. People often try to share things from a private group. And oftentimes what's shared in the private group is there for a reason. Somebody didn't really want it to be shared, or they're cross-sharing something so that people in that group can see it. So that's a good reminder for sure. Catherine.
I just want to give a cautionary tale. We have posted our events on Facebook, and we've found the last couple events that someone else has taken our information and then posted that you contact me to register, and there are people we don't even know who they are. So you have to really watch for that so that someone doesn't do something harmful to you, to the church or to your event.
Unfortunate reality of internet today, isn't it? But yes, very good reminder.
We have had that happen, and I believe we turned our comments off so people can't comment.
Mhm.
You can just do the event and the information and not be to comment on it. They can give a thumb up and say they want to come, but they can't like.
All right. Any other questions? We're almost at 10 after, but while we have these guys captive, any other questions? All right. Oh, go ahead, Dorothy.
Sorry.
I
That's
can't
okay.
find my raise hand. I might be under the wrong account.
That's okay.
One thing that I do really like, if you do send out, say, emails, is when there is a link to add it to my calendar. One of the things that I do like to do on Facebook, is when you create an event, Facebook kind of helps to add that to people's calendars and send a reminder. And so if I have an event that I'm sending an email out for, or getting an email for, I really appreciate when there's a calendar link. I can just click on it and add it to my calendar because I too live by my Google Calendar. So I really find that very, very helpful. Obviously, if it was an all week event like a youth camp, probably that wouldn't be practical.
Yeah.
But for 1 day events, definitely, I think that that's very helpful. Um, and then, Kathy, as far as your, communication, um, just even getting a email list when you are having these regular events, say, hey, sign up for emails. We'll let you know when our next event is coming. We did that well, back before social media for our mom to mom sales, and we had hundreds of people that would show up because they would, we'd send out that invitation, say, hey, it's coming up in a month or so. And that was one of our best advertising.
Awesome. Thanks, Dorothy. I see that Parker and Joanna have put in the chat their social media, so we can do them a favor and give them a follow. And they've got some really great tips that they've shared that could be really helpful to you. So go and check out their website as well. We'll give an internet round of applause as a thank you to Cottonwood for being here with us. Is there any other thoughts or anything, Parker or Joanna, that you wanted to leave us with?
I'm just impressed. It was really cool to see the real events that you all are doing, and I know we only got to cover two, but we really do hope that that resource that you'll be getting from Linda is something that you can employ right away and create some systems for your congregations, for the Mission Center, and let us know if you have any questions. We just appreciate the opportunity to share a bit.
Yes, as Parker say, appreciate the time for everyone being here, and followed by the guide that you'll receive. We will really appreciate your feedback. That will be pretty helpful for us to take any feedback back and being able to continue doing this type of education for everyone.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much, and have a wonderful night, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.